Yeah, good evening, everyone. And this is the end of the session, which has been carried on since the morning. So I have been just, given the slot at the end of it just to sum up what has been discussed and interacted and interfaced during the whole day. And this was a very fruitful and productive discussion, as I can say from the agenda points, which was mentioned in that agenda items. However, we were discussing about the education. So actually, I am dealing with a host of subjects in the government of Puducherry. And among them, the important ones at present are scenic welfare, in which we are giving the aid to the army schools and the army institutions. So from there, we are implementing the new education policy. So I would just like to comment what is the state of implementation in the government, as I have been attending the various committees, and I'm also the member and also holding various discussions and taking part into various kind of interfaces which is happening in the government about the education policy and where it has been, where it stands as of now. Actually, the education policy which was introduced during the pandemic times in 2020, when most of the students were doing the online classes, actually the very less deliberations and discussions of the stakeholders of various of the education department was taken. Since it was pandemic, only the online collaboration and some kind of inputs were taken from the stakeholder. So still it is in the formative process. Still this education policy, which is a kind of a skeleton which the government has provided, still it is in the formative stages, and the details are being fulfilled in this education policy as and when we receive the inputs from the various stakeholders and about the feedback and various kind of reflections from the field. So since I am dealing with Puducherry, it will be worthwhile on my part to comment about the implementation of this education policy in the southern part of the India. Southern part, I mean to say that Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and this Puducherry where I am working, UT of Puducherry, and Kerala and Karnataka. So as there is a difference in the structure and also the various kind of institutions which are in place in the education department in southern states and also in the northern states. So so far as this southern states are concerned, the primary education and the primary level, primary unit of the whole governance is quite strong. When the primary unit of the governance is strong, that means the primary health centers, the Anganwadis, the Balwadis, the various kind of, the primary units and structures, that means that provides a kind of a support, the skeleton support to any kind of policy which has been dictated by the government from the top. So when it comes to education, as we all know, is bifurcated into three parts: primary education, secondary education, and this employability, that is university. So what happens in this southern states is that the level of implementation of this new education policy, which is about 5+3+3+4 scheme, that is quite well implemented, as because it envisages that a student should carry on the primary, this kindergarten classes starting from the age of 3, and also it should carry on till the age of 8, and so that it can learn some numeracy and also it can learn some digital skills. Now, why this happened? Why government introduced this kind of a kindergarten kind of a system? Because as from the previous, education system which was there in 2006 or 2003, it was noticed that the students who are studying in the primary level, they don't know the tables, they don't know the literacy, they don't know the language literacy, and the numeracy literacy was also not good. Though there was universal access to the education, the primary education, but it was noticed that, the quality of the education, the quality at which the child was faring, the assessment, when the evaluation was done, it was not done very satisfactorily. So therefore, in this new education policy, the government has introduced this particular kind of a kindergarten system in which the foundation skills of the student is strengthened. They say that if the foundation of the student when he is in the elementary stage is strengthened, then maybe it will provide a kind of a strong backbone to go ahead with the higher education. Now the unique thing about this education is that also it is giving some kind of a vocational training course. Now some schools have started the vocational training courses in engineering, in some kind of a medical field, in some kind of arts and sciences background in the school, at the school level. After the students, it enters the secondary stage in the 6th standard. So this kind of a vocational courses is still going on. So overall, I would say that the primary implementation, the primary part of the this national new education policy is doing quite well in the southern states. Well, I also attend the meetings about the northern states. Other states like, big states like, Bihar and UP, the implementation is little bit on the backstage, because maybe because of their, social indicators are not very fair. They are not very much faring well on the social indicators and sustainable goals. So, but the southern states are moving ahead when it comes to the northern states. Now, in this education policy, actually, we are in the stage where we have even recently, gone through pandemic, and we know, the uncertainty, the kind of chaos, the kind of confusion, the ambiguity which we face, in the environment these days. Now, as we have seen in the very live practical example, we all have experienced pandemic where we were totally disrupted and we were all working from home, and also, we were just seeing that, we were just going through hybrid and blended learning and all these kind of things. So government has thought about the employability, that how to, upskill the students at the elementary level, so that they can learn, they can then again unlearn, and they can again relearn. So this is the main focus of this new education policy, to facilitate the skills in the student, so that it can take up the skills, it can learn the skills, it can then unlearn it, and also it can then again relearn, depending upon what kind of skills which are available, which are needed in the market. So this is the major primary essence behind this education policy. Now, the primary education is doing quite well in this education policy, but the challenges lies ahead in the implementation of the higher education as a part of this new education policy. The thing is that in the higher education, there is a criteria, there is a clause which is introduced by the government saying that it has to be multidisciplinary. So now the multidisciplinary clause, that is as it was being discussed here in the panel discussion which preceded my address here, that people are saying that what will be the core competency of the student and what will be the additional qualification of the student, how the student will differentiate, that what kind of core competency the student will carry on. So but then multidisciplinary is a need of the hour, because we are in the stage of digitization. We are using the digital space for enriching our education, for adding the value in our education system. So multidisciplinary skills have to be upgraded with the student, have to be learned by the student. Now in this particular kind of an environment where we are dealing with volatility, where we are dealing with ambiguity, confusion, where we really don't know in the age of artificial intelligence and machine learning as to where are we going to go in the implementation of various kind of goals and objectives. But the thing is that this is how the student has to learn, it has to upgrade, it has to navigate the uncertainty. So therefore, but the thing is that from where are we going to provide the infrastructure? One good thing about education policy is that it is very much open-ended, in the sense that it is providing the participation of the government, of the private sector, because government will be only the facilitator and will only be defining the policy guidelines, whereas filling the details and also about implementation will be mainly done by the private sectors, and the rules and the clauses have been defined very liberally, and the private sector, the voluntary sector, the non-government organizations, they have to fill in the gaps, they have to take the role. And moreover, it is said that government is very ambitious in this new education policy. It is trying to, achieve and bring about social equity and inclusion and justice. Social equity, inclusion and justice means that it is going to empower the marginalized and the disadvantaged and the unprivileged group of society, and also going to bring them into the framework. One thing about it is that, it is very gender friendly too. Now, why I'm saying gender friendly? Because in the previous policies, we have seen that, the women, they are obtaining 100, they are obtaining and are ahead in obtaining the degrees in whether it comes to engineering, whether it comes to medical. But the same thing is not getting translated in the contribution of GDP. The degrees, they are holding the degrees, they are holding the educational qualifications. But what happens to them? Why aren't they taking it as a career? Or why aren't they, translating the same thing towards, the profession or towards the career? There are many aspects, there are many social, and the other, reasons for it. Maybe there are internal barriers, there are external barriers, subconscious biases in the society. But the major problem is that we have to facilitate the women and the gender. So therefore, the care, affordable care, is a part of this particular education policy, where the government is seeking investments from the private sector to come into this care sector in the form of now at present we are only having balwadis, where the educational skills are be given at the kindergarten level to all the students or all the children. But the care industry is being promoted in this education policy to come and make investments and to provide the affordable care, so that the women can enter in more quality and quantity in the workforce. At present, the literate urban women, participation in the workforce is just about 20%, which is static from 2002 onwards. So this is a matter of concern. When women are, obtaining a lot of education degrees, then why it is not getting translated into the GDP of the country, into the economic activity? So this is the matter of concern which is being trying to address in this education policy, where the government is seeking investments from the care industry to come and please make some investments in providing the affordable care. Now, just last point I would like to, raise that since this is a very ambitious, education policy floated by the government so as to increase the employability of the kids, there are some misconceptions, which has been floating around, which I want to clear. That yes, government is, promoting multilingualism in this policy, but it doesn't mean that, it is promoting Hindi in it. It is promoting that compulsorily you have to teach in Hindi only. It is just, just to make, the things very clear, so that at the primary level, at the kindergarten level, students are more accustomed to their mother tongue. So the government has been introducing this particular policy of, teaching in its mother tongue and learning in the mother tongue. It doesn't mean that government is trying to dictate, that the application of Hindi. And moreover, there is a scientific evidence available from the various kind of neuroscientists and neurologists that when we learn different languages, the various faculty of the brain in our frontal cortex, it gets activated, and our emotional intelligence, it increases. And emotional intelligence and various faculty of our brain, it increases, and it gives rise to innovative other kind of products and services. So this is a very kind of a very productive part of the education policy which the government is trying to introduce, and it is still in the elementary stage. And it is good that we are today discussing the whole, we have devoted the whole particular day towards this particular kind of education conference, which is specializing in discussing and interacting about education. So I really congratulate the organizers that they have spent the whole day about the discussions and the inputs that we will be receiving for maybe just reflecting upon the various policy frameworks, because ultimately the government takes the inputs from the public and various kind of interfaces and interactions that takes place. However, the government is also, through this education policy, is focusing upon soft skills and emotional intelligence instead of IQ, intelligence, IQ, instead of IQ, the government is promoting EQ, emotional intelligence, so that you have got the capacity and the capability to take the uncertainty, to take the setbacks, to take the failures, because ultimately the innovation and various kind of creations will come through these kind of failures, to encourage creativity, curiosity, imagination. So, I have to just provide this input, otherwise the time was very short, given to me by the organizers to discuss the education policy. But then I just have to give the perspective of the government side here. Maybe it is a very short time for me to, just deliberate on all these kind of points, but still I have been able to put forward some important ones. And ultimately the implementation lies with the private sector, with the government NGOs, when all the other agencies, and whereas government is just the policy, just involved with the policy frameworks, but any kind of suggestions would be most welcome. And if there are any questions, I would be delighted to take those questions.